Alberta's independence fight is no longer a quiet background debate. It is now a roaring fire that Ottawa can no longer ignore. And it is not just Alberta, even the Yukon, way up north and long dismissed as irrelevant by the political elites, is starting to stir. Canada's forgotten frontier is asking the same hard question Alberta has been shouting for years. Why stay in a country that bleeds you dry while giving nothing in return? The Yukon government has just taken a step that speaks louder than words. They've created their first ever health authority because Ottawa refuses to deliver even the basics. That move says everything you need to know about where this country's heading. Think about it. 7 people were appointed to launch the Shuaha Health and Wellness Center Yukon, a project born out of desperation, not luxury. Life in the Yukon is brutal, and I am not just talking about the icy winters. The cost of living is the highest in the entire country. Rent and utilities crush families because everything has to be imported from thousands of kilometers away. Ottawa pretends not to notice while locals scrape by. Do you want a larger apartment or a modest house in the Yukon? Be ready to pay around $2,000 a month, and then brace yourself for heating costs that can bankrupt you every single winter, while ordinary families freeze. Ottawa shrugs its shoulders. That is the reality. And then there is healthcare, a complete disaster. Specialists have to be flown in, appointments delayed for months. Some residents do not even bother to seek care anymore because they face systemic racism and open disrespect in the system. Ottawa does nothing. Ottawa fixes nothing. So what happens if Yukoners step up and build their own health authority just to survive? That is not innovation. That is survival when a so-called national government abandons you. This new authority will work with Yukon First Nations to tackle systemic racism, promote cultural safety, and deliver inclusive care. And why? Because the federal government cannot be trusted to treat northern citizens with basic dignity. Jobs in the Yukon are unstable and seasonal. Agriculture collapses under the cold. Construction halts for months under the snow. Young people flee south because there is nothing left to keep them in their communities. Ottawa pockets the resource revenue and then spends it thousands of kilometers away. Small towns are hollowing out, and still the capital pretends nothing is wrong. So when people ask if the Yukon could ever join Alberta or Saskatchewan in a sovereignty push, I don't laugh anymore. Because when you are stuck with collapsing healthcare, impossible living costs, and zero opportunities, while Ottawa hoards your wealth, the only logical conclusion is to start whispering enough, and those whispers are getting louder every day. Now, let us come back to Alberta. Danielle Smith drew a line in the sand months ago. She handed Ottawa a list of 12 demands. Not polite suggestions, not half measures. These were non-negotiable ultimatums. Repeal Bill C-69. Lift the tanker ban. Scrap the oil and gas emissions cap. End the net zero car mandate. Restore provincial control over the carbon tax and guarantee export corridors. The list went on. This was Alberta saying, treat us like the powerhouse we are, or face the consequences. And Smith gave Ottawa 6 months to act. Well, 5 of those 6 months have now passed. And what has Ottawa done? Nothing. No repeals. No concessions. No progress. Just the same tired stall tactics, hoping Albertans will get exhausted and back down. But Albertans are not backing down. They are furious. And they are organizing. Independence talk is not just bar chatter anymore. It is legal, structured, and gaining unstoppable momentum. The numbers prove it. The petition threshold for a referendum used to be nearly impossible. 640,000 signatures. Today, it has been slashed to 177. 000. That is achievable. That is realistic. And here's the bombshell. Organizers already claim they have more than 240. 000 pledges. That is not a theory. That is reality. The vote is not a question of if anymore. It is a question of when the ballot is coming. Danielle Smith herself admitted it. A citizen-led push cannot be stopped by government. If Albertans sign, then Albertans will vote. And when that day comes, Ottawa will not have a single legal excuse left. This is not just anger. This is survival. Alberta has finally said enough. The West has been abused for decades. The West has been taken for granted. Look at the record. Keystone XL killed. Energy East scrapped. Northern Gateway vetoed. Billions of dollars in opportunity destroyed by federal arrogance. How many times can a province be told to sit down, shut up, and keep paying the bills before it flips the table? That breaking point has already arrived. And let us talk about the theft, because that is exactly what this is. Systematic. Generational theft. Every single year, Ottawa drains $20 to $22 billion out of Alberta's economy. Do the math. That is $5. 000 stolen from every single Albertan every single year. Families, seniors, children, nobody is spared. Over the last 50 years, More than $600 billion siphoned e-steel. Do you realize what that could have built? Entire hospital system, state-of-the-art schools in every city, infrastructure so advanced Alberta could rival any nation on earth, taxes slashed, small businesses supercharged. That is what Alberta's wealth could have created. Instead, it was stolen. And stolen for what? To buy votes in Quebec and other liberal strongholds. Alberta's wealth bankrolls provinces that insult its oil industry, call it dirty oil, and sneer at its people. The hypocrisy is staggering. Alberta independence is the only way to end this theft. Otherwise, it is an endless cycle. The West works, Ottawa steals. Quebec and the Atlantic provinces cash the checks while mocking the very industries that made them possible. That is not a federation. That is exploitation dressed up as unity. Let us dig deeper into what Ottawa has done to Alberta. Bill C-69, the infamous No More Pipelines law, was designed with one goal: choke Alberta's energy sector to death. The federal carbon tax piles extra costs onto families and businesses already struggling. And every time Alberta tries to build for the future, Ottawa vetoes it. $500 billion in projects blocked or destroyed. That is $500 billion in lost opportunities. That is $500 billion stolen futures. And it all comes down to one fact: Ottawa would rather keep Alberta locked in chains than let it succeed on its own terms. For years, Alberta has been treated not as a partner, but as a piggy bank. Shake it, rob it, and then tell it to shut up. That is the relationship. And Albertans have finally realized it. The October 1st deadline is not just another meaningless date. It is the moment of truth. Danielle Smith cannot afford to blink. If she fails to show teeth up, if she fails to deliver consequences, then she will lose the very people who believed in her. Patience is gone. Anger is raw. The independence train has already left the station. And Alberta holds the cards here. This province is not just another cog in the machine. It is the lifeline of Confederation, the top GDP driver, the energy engine that keeps the country running. Without Alberta, Ottawa holds nothing but a pair of twos, bluffing like it always does. For years, Albertans accepted scraps. For years, they folded at the table, but not this time. The chips are in. The cards are on the table. Either Alberta goes all in, or it condemns itself to another generation of theft and humiliation. Here is the ugly truth no one in Ottawa dares to admit. Over the last 50 years, the equalization scam has drained about $250,000 per person from Alberta. That is $250. 000 stolen from every man, woman, and child. That is not just a statistic. That is a stolen future. That is families who could have had affordable housing, children who could have had world-class schools, communities that could have thrived instead of shrinking up. And instead, what do we see? Schools closing programs because the funding is gone. Sports facilities falling apart. Small towns losing their young people to big cities because there are no opportunities left. Meanwhile, Quebec and Ontario gorge themselves on Alberta's wealth while sneering at the oil industry that produced it. That is hypocrisy at a level that defies belief. And it is not just economics. This is generational theft that hits the young the hardest. Ask any 25-year-old in Alberta if they believe Ottawa has their back. They will laugh in your face. All they have ever seen is betrayal, theft, and humiliation. Try buying a house at that age in Alberta today. Prices are insane. Paychecks are stagnant. Energy jobs are strangled by red tape. And the reason is simple. Ottawa's fingerprints are all over it. They drain Alberta to fund handouts in the East, while leaving Alberta's youth scrambling for stability. These young people are not citizens. They are wallets to be emptied. And when young people stop believing in the system itself begins to collapse. That is what is happening. Resentment is not just a passing mood. It is hardwired into a new generation. They are growing up knowing that Ottawa is not on their side, and that resentment is turning into political firepower. Once faith in the system is gone, there's no putting the pieces back together. This is not only about money, this is about culture and values. Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Yukon, they stand for faith, family, freedom, grit, and self-reliance. Ottawa represents the exact opposite. Bureaucracy, entitlements, and progressive dictates shoved down everyone's throat, whether they like it or not. That is why compromise is dead. You cannot bridge values that are total opposites. Once politics becomes about culture and values, there is no middle ground left. That is when separation stops being a bargaining chip and becomes the only realistic option. Canada is not one country anymore. It is two nations pretending to live under one flag, and the divorce papers are being written in real time. Look at history. Political unions dissolve all the time. Norway walked away from Sweden. Slovakia split from Czechoslovakia. Ireland left the United Kingdom. Nations endure. Bad unions date. Alberta is a nation. Saskatchewan is a nation. The Yukon is waking up to the same reality. Canada is just paperwork. That paperwork has no soul, no loyalty, no fairness. Out in farm towns across Saskatchewan and northern Alberta, people live by hard work and survival. They pull wealth out of the ground, whether it is oil, wheat, or uranium. Contrast that with Ottawa's elites, sipping lattes while lecturing the West about climate change, all while cashing the very checks that Western oil and gas paid for. That is not just hypocrisy. That is cultural warfare, and the Yukon feels that same warfare. Small rural communities already struggling with high costs and collapsing healthcare are constantly told by bureaucrats thousands of kilometers away what they can and cannot do. Decisions are made as if the Yukon does not exist. When Yukoners decided to build their own health authority to fight systemic racism and collapsing services, where was Ottawa? Nowhere. Because Ottawa does not care about fixing problems. It only cares about controlling them. That is the story across the map. Control without care. Authority without accountability. This is why talk of sovereignty is not going away. It is not fringe anymore. It is mainstream. Momentum is a funny thing. At first people dismiss it, call it noise, but then the signatures pile up. The rallies fill halls. Lawyers draft roadmaps. Petitions gain legal standing. Suddenly it is no longer fringe. It is a movement with teeth. And that is exactly where Alberta is today. The organizers are already boasting over 240,000 pledges, far beyond the threshold. Saskatchewan's 125,000 signature trigger is also in motion, and Premier Scott Moe has openly said he will not block a referendum if the people demand it. That is as close to a green light as you will ever get in politics. And then there is the Yukon. Quiet, ignored, dismissed for decades, but even there, whispers of separation are growing. They're asking the same question Alberta asked years ago. Why stay in a federation that only bleeds you dry? Why stay in a system that does not see you as citizens but as ATMs? Meanwhile, Canada's economy is tanking. Capital flight is at record highs. Investors, both foreign and domestic, are pulling out. Everyday headlines tell the same story. The economy is dwindling. This is not just a few angry protests. This is farm towns, mining communities, small cities, organizing at a scale Ottawa cannot ignore. These are not mobs. These are structured campaigns with legal strategies, with petitions ready for ballots, with lawyers already mapping the path forward. This is not rebellion. This is governance in waiting. And the polls back it up. 1/3 of Albertans are firmly ready to vote leave. Another third are leaning that way. That is 2/3 of the province staring at the exit door. Saskatchewan is above 40%, and climbing. Interior BC is restless. The Yukon is fed up. This is not fringe. This is the new mainstream. Every time Ottawa tries to scare the West with threats of collapse, it backfires. Taxes, vetoes, and insults do not create fear anymore. They create determination. They make independence look more attractive than ever. When threats stop working, a movement has crossed the point of no return. That is exactly where Alberta and Saskatchewan are right now. And with the Yukon starting to murmur the same frustrations, Ottawa is running out of allies outside its own backyard. The numbers do not lie. Alberta contributes $6,000 in taxes per person and gets almost nothing back. Meanwhile, Quebec gives about $4,000 but enjoys $9,000 in benefits. That is not federal fairness. That is corruption dressed up as equalization. And equalization is the lifeline of the entire system. Without Alberta, it collapses overnight. Without Alberta and Saskatchewan, 75% of Canada's oil production disappears instantly. Billions stop flowing east. The Maritimes crumble financially. Quebec cannot survive without Alberta's money. Ontario would struggle. The so-called national economy would disintegrate. That is how fragile this federation actually is. And here's the real turning point. The Yukon's quiet revolt shows that this sickness is not confined to the prairies. For decades, the North was ignored, treated as a colony rather than a partner. Now they're standing up, building their own health authority, daring to whisper about sovereignty. If even the Yukon is fed up, Ottawa's illusion of national unity is finished. History proves this moment is not unique. Norway walked away from Sweden. Slovakia split from Czechoslovakia. Ireland left the United Kingdom. Political unions collapse all the time. Nations endure. Bad unions die. So why should Alberta, Saskatchewan, or the Yukon be any different? Let us call equalization what it truly is. Money laundering. Alberta's wealth does not go directly to Quebec. It goes to Ottawa, gets mixed into federal revenues, and then redistributed so that the origin is hidden. That is laundering on a national scale. The message could not be clearer. Time is up. Negotiations are dead. Either Ottawa respects sovereignty, or Canada fractures into history. And honestly, does anyone believe Ottawa will change? They have had 50 years to change. They have had every chance to respect Alberta, to treat the West like partners. Instead, they doubled down on theft, on humiliation, on betrayal. Confederation was supposed to be a partnership. Instead, it has become an abusive relationship where Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon pay the bills while being treated like unwanted tenants. And in any abusive relationship, the healthy option is not more compromise. It is leaving. This is Canada's Yugoslav moment. On the surface, it may look stable, but under the surface, debt, corruption, division, and rage are boiling over. One spark will be enough. Maybe it is the October 1st deadline. Maybe it is another federal insult. Maybe it is just one more veto on a billion-dollar project. Whatever the spark, the explosion is coming. So when people ask if separation is realistic, the answer is simple. It is not just realistic, it is inevitable, because once the most productive provinces in a country realize they are stronger on their own, nothing can stop them. Alberta knows it. Saskatchewan knows it. And now, even the Yukon is starting to feel it. Think about the momentum. Petitions are not abstract anymore. They are signed, sealed, and ready. Over 240. 000 pledges in Alberta. Threshold already crushed. Saskatchewan's 125 000 signature mark is within reach. Premier Scott Moe has said clearly that he will not block a referendum if the people demand it. That is not rebellion. That is democracy in action. That is governance preparing for the next stage. And what is Ottawa's response? Empty threats, empty promises, more red tape, more delays. But every time they try to scare the West, it only hardens the resolve. Every insult, every veto, every tax, every sneer makes independence look more like the only way forward. The truth is that Ottawa does not hold power anymore. It holds a bluff, and the West finally knows it. Alberta has the energy lifeline. Saskatchewan has the agricultural and resource backbone. The Yukon controls a vast northern frontier that Ottawa cannot even pretend to manage properly. Take those out of Confederation and the entire structure crumbles. Canada is not one nation anymore. It is two. The West, built on grit, self-reliance, faith, and freedom. And Ottawa, built on bureaucracy, entitlements, and control. Those values cannot coexist under one roof. The divide is cultural, not just economic. Once politics becomes culture, there is no compromise left. That is why the push for sovereignty is no longer a bargaining chip. It is the only realistic answer. And let us be blunt, Ottawa is finished. The equalization scam is exposed. The petitions are moving. The deadlines are here. The anger is not going away. It is only growing stronger. Alberta has waited 50 years for respect. It never came. Saskatchewan has watched its industries strangled. The Yukon has been abandoned to collapse. Enough is enough. October 1st is not Ottawa's deadline. It is Alberta's. It is Saskatchewan's. It is the Yukon's. Either they act or they condemn themselves to another generation of theft and humiliation. There is no middle ground anymore. The time for patience is gone. The time for action has arrived. To the outside world, Canada might look like a single country, but anyone paying attention knows the truth. The West is done being bled dry. The West is done being mocked. The West is done paying for an abusive union that offers nothing in return. The divorce is inevitable. The only question left is when the papers will be signed. And when that day comes, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon will not vanish. They will not collapse. They will not fade. They will rise stronger, free from the chains of Ottawa's arrogance. Nations endure. Bad unions and Canada, as we know it, is about to join the long list of failed unions that history has buried.